So I found these guys. These were my watercolour paints from when I was in school. So I think up until I was about 16, 17 maybe, I used these. I don't remember them being particularly good, but you know, we'll find out. And I thought I would compare them to the paints I use now, which are these, which are White Knights. And I also have the paints that I got almost immediately after I finished school. These are Daler and Rowney Aquafine. So I thought I'd compare these as well. So the Reeves would be introductory watercolours, I guess. The Daler and Rowney were definitely student quality, and the White Knights are artist quality. So the Reeves you could get for about £5 for this kind of tin. The Daler and Rowney I found recently for about £10 for this set of 12 half pans, and the White Knights are about £20 for 12 full pans. So they're actually price-wise, for the amount of paint you get, the same as the Daler and Rowney. I missed the swatching of the Reeves, but it was actually better than I expected. They generally felt very smooth, they're really pigmented, and I did wet the pans for a little while before using them, but I was pleasantly surprised by the Reeves actually. I remember them being a lot chalkier. The Daler and Rowney are nice and smooth. I love these paints, and you can see how much I use them. And a couple of those pans have actually been replaced because I ran out of them, and I think I only used these for 2 years maybe before I got the White Knights, so these are really well used. What I should mention with the swatches is that I didn't take the paper down, so it's ended up curving a bit, and we've got some pooling in some of the swatches, so not the paint's fault, definitely my fault. The White Knights do feel really nice to use, they swatch nicely, but to get a real idea of how these paints compare, I've drawn a few illustrations up of dinosaurs. So we're going to try and get a smooth wash, as smooth as possible. We've got black shapes on each of the dinosaurs, so we'll be testing the transparency of the watercolours, and we'll see what else we're doing. So as the Reeves swatches have dried, some of them have actually dried really flat, really smooth, especially like the yellow, but they do look quite chalky and less transparent than the other two paints, and the surface, it almost has like a little cracking to it. I guess that's kind of part of the chalkiness, but other than that, they've dried kind of flatter than I remember, but this is just swatches. So here we have our three very simple dinosaurs. On the left we are trying the White Knights, the top right is the Reeves, and the bottom right is the Daler and Rowney. The idea is to get as smooth and flat a wash as possible on the dinosaurs. We're testing the transparency of the paints over the black shapes, and I'm going to try a little bit of layering too, but I want to keep these really simple. The Reeves actually surprised me. I expected them to be much more difficult to use and a lot more chalky, and they are chalky, but not as much as I remembered. So I think when I was using these watercolours in school, they were definitely a good enough quality for what I was doing, and by the time I bought the Daler and Rowney, it's because I knew I needed a better quality paint for the kind of work that I was doing. And I think when I've looked online for the Reeves, they don't seem to make these anymore. They're generally not available at many places, but you'll see a lot of kind of duplicates. The main one I saw was one called Major Brushes, and the reviews on that are terrible. So I think I'm expecting the quality from that kind of set to be in this one, whereas actually I'd say these Reeves tins they're really good. I only did one row of the back scale things on the Reeves dinosaur to keep it really simple, and I tried to do a bit of gradient, which worked well until I tried to remove some of the pigment on one of them. It pulled up all the paint underneath. So the Reeves aren't necessarily very forgiving, and I find I'm often using kitchen towel to pick up a little bit of pigment when I'm using the White Knights, or even when I was using the Daler and Rowney, and I can usually get the majority of the colour off and come back later and fix it. Whereas with the Reeves, it didn't seem that that was really as much of an option. And as the Reeves is drying, you can see how dull those black triangles are becoming, because the watercolour isn't really transparent, and it's not as transparent as the other two paints. I didn't want the dinosaurs floating around in space, so I've added a little bit of a kind of dirt ground for them to be standing on, and once I'd done that I felt like we just had to have a full painted in background, nothing complicated, just plain blue sky. And actually I think for comparing how flat a wash you can get, it's going to be a bit better to have the same colour on each, or at least incredibly close colours on each of them, to get a really clear comparison for how flat and smooth these washes are. And this also makes up for all the dinosaurs not being the same colour, it's just a bit of a fairer comparison. I wasn't planning to have a border on these, but I didn't want to take the tape off because that would just completely mess up the washes, so we ended up with borders. Another way that I decided to try out the layering was to go on the back legs. They would be painted in the same colour as the rest of the dinosaur. Then when it was dry, I went back to them and added another wash of a slightly darker colour to see if it picked up the colour that was underneath it. This worked fine with the White Knights, it worked fine with the Dale and Rowney. With the Reeves, it did pick up a bit of the yellow pigment from underneath, so you've ended up with a sort of uneven surface and uneven colour there. I did find the Reeves was okay with layering if you were incredibly quick. The Dale and Rowney, I had a problem with the Dale and Rowney, and it wasn't because of the paints at all, it's because they're so well travelled that I think there was just some general like grit and dirt and definitely some sand that was kind of caught in the pans, and it had dried into the paint. So it took a while, but I managed to clean it more thoroughly and kind of remove the top layer of the paints where the sand had sort of dried into them. But that's completely because of them living with me and nothing to do with the paints themselves. So I think the Dale and Rowney probably have had a bit of a harder life than the White Knights, but we got there, and you can see how nice and smooth that wash is compared to the Reeves. And the White Knights I just love, they're so easy to use, the wash is really smooth, I don't really have any complaints about them. They're the nicest quality watercolour that I guess I've ever used, so I wouldn't know if it gets better. But I'm really happy with them, I really like the colour selection that they have, and I haven't found anything that I've tried to do with the White Knights that I haven't been able to because of the paints rather than just because of me not necessarily knowing the right methods. So even though I love the Dale and Rowney, I still do prefer the White Knights. So we've got our completed 3 dinosaurs, we've got the Reeves, the Dale and Rowney, Aquafine and the White Knights. I think there's a pretty clear winner. So the most obvious thing I think really is the blue like sky. So you can see the Reeves, there's a lot of texture. The Dale and Rowney is generally very smooth, a little bit of texture, but that's more to do with the sand that I mentioned. And the White Knights is just smooth. I think the next obvious thing would be the layering. So the back legs on all of them had the base colour of the dinosaur and then another colour slightly darker. The Reeves it's not terrible. If you're really quick then it works okay, which is like this side, but if we're looking at the other side you can see that it picked up the pigment underneath, which was dry. Dale and Rowney's, yeah, fine. The White Knights was fine. The other thing worth mentioning is when I was like removing bits of pigment with kitchen roll. I tried to do this on the Reeves and you can see that it just pulled up the layer underneath completely. It was completely dry and it just like... So that didn't work out quite so well with the Reeves. The only trouble that I actually had with the White Knights was because I had taped down the border, not really having thought ahead what I was going to do, I had to cut the washi tape out, and where there was residue from the tape, the paint didn't stick quite as well, so that's what this little line here is. The washi tapes I use are just from Michael's, they're not really meant for this. They semi-regularly tear up the paper anyway, so not unexpected really. The other big difference is the transparency. So you can see with the White Knights and the Dale and Rowney there was no issue with the pen being covered, whereas with the Reeves it's almost gone grey on the face because the yellow's just obscured the marker underneath it.
So that's all I have to say about these. For the swatches, I did put them up in my window for a month, maybe even 2 months by the time I've got around to finishing this. And at one point there seemed to be a line across the Reeves of this blue. I think it's a kind of Prussian or Prussian blue, which are known to be a bit less light fast than other colours. And what you can see with the Reeves especially is that the surfaces have cracked. And when I was trying to sort out the light fast test, I did this little swatch sheet very quickly. This goes Winsor & Newton, no it doesn't, this goes White Nights, Daler Rowney, Reeves. Ignore the White Nights and the Daler Rowney. You can see the Reeves kind of have this discoloration around the edge. You can see some of them have dried in a really strange way. I think it's from whatever fillers they use. Something that I forgot to mention earlier with the Reeves is because of the chalkiness, the paint actually comes up so that it's all over my finger. So the chalkiness of the paint makes it kind of come off the page, and that is not something that happens with the Daler & Rowney Aquafine or with the White Nights. I think that's kind of all I have to say about these really. I had a lot of fun making them, I had a lot of fun going through my old supplies. So maybe I can make like a pretty thumbnail. I'm not convinced that I can.
So if I only had the Reeves set available and wanted to do some sketching, maybe just for fun illustrations, I wouldn't not make them because I only had the Reeves set. For anything finished, I'm going to be using the White Nights, but I think the Daler & Rowney I'm actually going to put back on my desk because I do kind of miss these guys. White Nights are definitely still my favourite. I prefer the colour selection between them and the Daler & Rowney Aquafine, and they just feel nicer to use. Overall they feel and look a higher quality. So this has been fun. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you think. I don't have many other supplies of a kind of varying quality apart from maybe alcohol markers, but I have lots of stuff from my school days that I haven't used for years, so that could be pretty fun to try some of those things out again. So let me know if you'd want to see that kind of thing, and if you have any old supplies just lying around that you haven't used in forever. So I'll see you in the next video.